Manasi madam, shall we start?
Yeah, we can start.
Okay, ma'am. Good afternoon. Welcome to the third annual CME of the Department of Community Medicine from Pushperi Medical College, Tiruvalla. This year, our CME program is conducted as webinar series. Our theme is Resolution of Paradox, solving the conventional concepts of liability and validity. We have planned 4 sessions of 1 hour duration to be held on consecutive Fridays, starting from today at 2 p.m. Our speaker for today's topic, Understanding the Lab Test in the Wake of COVID-19 Pandemic, is Dr. Manasi Ravindranath, Assistant Professor in the Department of Microbiology, Government Medical College, Kannur. Next topic, on 12th November, Dr. Devraj R., Assistant Professor in the Department of Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Thiruvananthapuram, will be taking the session on liability versus validity, often a trade-off. Third session on 19 November by Dr. Biju George, Associate Professor in the Department of Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Calicut, on predictive values versus likelihood ratio. The final session will be on 26th of November by Dr. Anish T.S., Associate Professor, Department of Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Thiruvananthapuram. So coming to today's topic, understanding the lab test and the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us today is Dr. Manasi Ravindranath, Assistant Professor in the Department of Microbiology, Government Medical College, Kannur. She has completed her MBBS from Government Medical College, Kannur, and a postgraduate degree from AG Institute of Medical Science, Mangalore. She is experienced in diagnosing and systematic processing of various clinical specimens and also in identifying the infectious agents. She is experienced in medical mycology. Also, she worked in concurrence with the hospital infection control team for prevention and control of hospital-acquired infections. She is also experienced in virology. Presently, she is working as virology in charge in Government Medical College, Kannur. It is our privilege to have you for this session. I welcome Dr. Manasi Ravindranath. Please leave your comments and questions in the comment box. We will discuss it at the end of the session. 10 minutes will be allotted for discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Mary, and thank you everyone who has invited me for the presentation. So I think we can start the topic directly.
Yes,
Will you be sharing the screen or shall I be?
Ma'am, you can share the screen, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm very happy that I've been invited to get a talk on the present scenario that we are going on. We are facing the COVID pandemic now, and the topic of utmost importance is now regarding the tests. And so we shall directly move on to understanding the test in wake of COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll be just outlining some part about the introduction of COVID-19, its structure and diagnosis, and some few in detail about the nucleic acid testing related to COVID-19 test and antibody testing, and also some vulnerabilities in the laboratory diagnosis of COVID-19. So just to start with, we'll just look at the timeline of coronavirus. That is from the beginning. That is, it was in 2019, December 8th, that the first patient who developed symptoms at Wuhan. And it was on 31st December that China had alerted WHO regarding the spread or regarding the several viral pneumonia cases that has been reported. So yeah, And then about in Jan 11th, they recorded the first death. And by Jan 29th, there were about the death toll has increased to about 13 lakhs. So yeah, and then coming to India, what is the timeline that is of COVID-19 in India in January 30th, 2020?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you put it in the slideshow mode, ma'am?
This is not clear.
No, ma'am.
Okay, okay, I will. Now is it okay?
No, ma'am. Actually, it's not in the slideshow mode.
It
Full
is,
screen.
yeah, I put it in the slideshow mode. Now is it okay? Is it
No,
clear?
ma'am.
Is it clear?
No, ma'am. It's not in the slideshow mode. I mean, it's not in full screen.
You may have to close it and reopen it in the slideshow mode.
Okay. No.
Ma'am, still not in full screen. Shall we share the screen?
Yeah, yeah. Please.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, now we can proceed, ma'am. Now it's in full screen.
So yeah, I just told you about the timeline, the beginning. It was in December 8th that the first case of COVID-19 was reported, and China notifies WHO about several pneumonia cases, and the identification of new virus was in Jan 7, 2020. So in India, the first confirmed case was reported on 30th January. It was from a student who had returned from Wuhan University. So by March 15th, it was the cases has confirmed cases has crossed 100, and by the end of March, 28th of March, we had confirmed cases crossed about 1,000. So just to start, how was it in the beginning? Just to tell how it has progressed. So yeah, this is microbiology, that is classification. The organism, it is Coronaviridae. It belongs to family Coronaviridae. There are 4 types: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, of which alpha and beta are the ones which has caused infection in humans. And among the beta coronavirus, there are 4 types, of which the A, B, C, D, B had caused the most severe ones, which is the SARS and MERS as well as the one that we are presently dealing with, which is SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 or novel coronavirus. So these are the names that has been given to 7 important coronaviruses that is cause infection in humans and respiratory diseases, of which the most important ones are the last 3, which caused severe respiratory distress, SARS, then MERS and SARS-CoV. So there has always been a link of zoonotic link that had caused towards these infections, but now what we are dealing with, we are not yet sure whether it has got a zoonotic link or not, but there is chance. Coming to the structure of coronavirus, these are all familiar to all of you, but I will just tell. So this has got spikes surrounding the organism. That is how it gets the name corona. And it has got the spikes are called it forms a spike protein, which is critical for binding with the host cell receptors to facilitate its entry into the host cell. Then it has got a nucleocapsid protein. It is a large virus which has got a positive sense single strand RNA, and the nucleocapsid protein or the N protein, it binds to the RNA genome to make the nucleocapsid. It has got an envelope protein which interacts with the M protein to develop the viral envelope. And it's the M protein which is a central organizer of the coronavirus assembly, which determines the shape of the viral envelope. So all these things together, it doesn't need all the particles to or a full ensemble of this virions or proteins are not required to make the virions. It requires, even if there are the function can be compensated by non-structural proteins as well, and it can produce the viable virions. So coming to the topic, the importance of laboratory testing related to the outbreaks. So there is what is the role of laboratory in epidemiology, and patient management perspectives is another thing, epidemiology and control of outbreak. So the impact, so it depends upon the rapid detection or early detection. If you have an early detection and early reporting, there is, you have an opportunity for control of the disease. So the first graph shows there was an impact, what is the impact of delayed reporting. So detection was done at the earlier stage, but lab confirmation and reporting was not done on the proper time. So what has happened is that you have an opportunity to control the infectious disease has come to a minimal effect. But the second graph, so it depends upon the impact of, it shows the impact of early reporting. The detection was done in the earlier stage, lab confirmation as well as response was taken immediately, and so you had a chance, you had an opportunity to control the potential cases that could have been developed. So prioritization for testing, it should be given to people who are at high risk of developing severe diseases and vulnerable population who will require hospitalization and advanced care if at all infected with COVID-19. Then symptomatic healthcare workers among the frontline workers, including emergency services and non-clinical staff. And then comes the first or symptomatic individuals in a closed setting, where you call the school group or the long-term living facilities, prisons, hospitals, etc. Yeah, so the correspondence between the development of viral load during SARS-CoV-2 infection. So how, there is a question that everyone asks about. So what is the viral load? How is it significant? What makes it important to know about the viral load? So at the onset of infection, there will may be very minimal amount of virus that is present in the concentrating areas like the nose and the throat. At the onset of infection, he may be having nil or not nil, minimal amount that can be detected by any test. So as the symptom progresses, as the symptom onset occurs, symptom progresses, slowly the viral amount or concentration in the nose and throat or nasal and pharyngeal, nasopharyngeal and pharyngeal area, it starts increasing. And when the symptoms after symptom onset, it increases to a peak and reaches its maximum. And as the symptom relief occurs, viral load comes down. So this is the window of testing. When you have an infection, symptoms occur, and from that to the symptom relief, you can have varying levels of viral load. It will peak at about the certain period when you have, it's about 5 to 10 in between 5 to 10 days, it will be peaking, and then that is the time, or that is the interval or window where you can get a RT-PCR or any other tests that can be done and detect the virus. So this is the viral load that it's again telling about the cycle threshold, which I will tell you about when we discuss about RT-PCR or CT value. So when it comes to an outbreak, what are the common problem in diagnostics? How the lab diagnostic is having, what are the problems they face in the diagnosis? So when you are dealing with a new disease or new outcome, new disease, there is always an unclear mechanism of the disease, how the disease is going to progress and how it is going to act, how you will not be able to assess it with the initial stage. Then all the diagnostic tool that has to be, that everybody will be thinking, or we are working on it, what to do, how to diagnose. So diagnostics tools are under development. And there is also lack of standardization of the sample type. What sample should be taken? How concentrated will be? Which sample has to be taken, and which will yield better virus load, etc. And then unclear. The patient or person who are collecting the sample, storing and handling of sample is also a very important factor in processing when you come to processing of viral samples. And then there are also, you don't have any standardized method. This is talking about when you are starting with a new outbreak of an infection. So no standardized method. There will be different, the target gene, what you have to target on, you will have to assess. You will have to first identify the organism, you will have to first sequence it, and then you see the target gene, what has to be targeted, so that the organism is properly identified. So these are the possibilities. So these are the problems that is faced by the lab when you are dealing with a new onset of infection. And these are the reasons where you can work upon to reduce the high potential for false negative as well as false positive results. Yeah, so moving on to the tests. What are the tests that you have to try to develop during the COVID new onset? So usual tissue that can be taken for diagnosis, in electron microscopy, that is a direct method for identification of any viral particle. You can isolate, or viral culture can be done. But these are all very tedious. You require very much sophisticated things or lab setup for doing all these things. Then same with the RT-PCR. Then comes the RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction and loop mediated amplification method, that is a RT-LAMP or LAMP. Protein isolation, specific antibody detection, ELISA, and rapid lateral flow. There are a whole lot of list of tests that can be done. So if you have a sequence, if your organism has been sequenced, the genetic sequencing has been done, then you can have a PCR the next day. It is the probes and primers for that particular gene which is required, which you require to identify, that can be done the very next day. Yeah. So coming to the parameters, what are the parameters that you will look for when you are testing for COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2? So that is RNA. It is the RNA and the genes in the RNA, that is what we are going to target. The genes that we target is ORF or open reading frame 1A and 1B, then the nucleocapsid gene, the envelope gene, and the spike protein gene. So there, these tests can be done by real-time RT-PCR, RT-LAM, all those things can be done using this. Then antigen is more antigen test or rapid antigen test, which is done often anywhere where you can proceed. That is clearly targeting upon, mostly it is targeting upon the nucleocapsid protein and the S protein. You can do immunochromatography, that is the spot test or the rapid test that we are doing. Then we can also opt for ELISA. Antibody testing for IgM, IgG, and IgA, which is not clearly for to identify the current infection. You can monitor the immune response of the patient, how well you have developed an antibody, or developed the antibody level once you've got an infection or infected with COVID virus. So that is the important. So that is the reason why you will be doing the antibody testing. IgM, IgG, and IgA. Again, you can do ELISA, lateral assay, or immunochromatography, chemiluminescence. Then clinically, the host responses, you can do complete blood count, C-reactive protein, D-dimer, all the liver enzymes, albumin, lactic dehydrogenase, all those things can be also add complementary to the other tests, which will help you to identify whether the patient is suffering or whether the patient may be susceptible or may be a suspect for COVID-19. So potential susceptibility could be the ACE2 or the HLA gene, which can be identified by genotyping, microarray, Sanger sensing, etc. So when coming on to the nucleic acid amplification test, which is now identified to be the test for identification or being confirming the test for COVID-19 or coronavirus, novel coronavirus. So you can take samples from upper respiratory specimens, lower respiratory specimens, and other specimens can also be taken. The nasopharyngeal swabs, nasal swabs, nasopharyngeal secretions, sputum, airway secretions, bronchoalveolar lavage. So depends the sample collection and the way you collect the sample. You have to collect, if you're collecting nasopharyngeal swab, there are chances that it gives you more yield of viruses than the throat swab that you collect. And the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid, it will have better concentration of viruses when you collect such samples. So the sample quality is plays a very important factor when you are identifying, when you are checking for RT-PCR or RNA for SARS coronavirus. If the sample quality is poor, if the collection of sample has not been proper, if it has not been, and if it has not reached the proper area of concentration, you will have very minimal amount of viruses in the swabs, and that will result in misidentification or non-identification or invalid tests sometimes if it is not if the sample collection is not proper. So other specimens have also been identified to have concentration of SARS coronavirus. That is, you can collect blood, feces, urine, conjunctival secretions are all, but it needs to be collected by a trained healthcare professional. So if you are collecting both nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal, these are all things that which are collected. You have to put both of them in the same medium so that better concentration of virus can be attained. So CDC recommendation for initial diagnostic testing is also nasopharyngeal specimen, oropharyngeal specimen, nasal mid-turbinate swab can also be taken, anterior nasal nair specimen, lower respiratory tract specimens like sputum and bronchoalveolar lavage can be used for testing, collected by a healthcare professional. So this shows how the nasopharyngeal swab has to be inserted where it should reach. So it's etiological, it's based on collection of upper respiratory tract specimen, nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs. Then analysis of the sample by real-time reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. Real-time means when you till the there is two parts for when you're processing for RT-PCR. When you collect the sample, sample collection is taken elsewhere. Sample is processed elsewhere most of the time. Here, when we take it in our setup also, we take samples are taken from the triage or in the ward, and it reaches the lab with proper packaging, everything. So once it reaches the lab, what has to be done is that you have to the processing is to be made clear, and it has to be done with utmost precision. So it has got two parts. First is you will go for the extraction. The sample that you've received will contain all the other cells. It's not only you will have the patient cells along with the RNA, so many other material, everything will be there in that you have to first purify. That is what you call the extraction procedure. It is the most time taking part of the processing. So once the extraction, we have various various kits that will provide various chemicals which will allow you to, which will help in extraction of the RNA, purification of the RNA. So once you've completed the extraction, you will get a pure RNA as well as the genomic part of the human cells also. So that will be there in the vial where you have extracted the RNA. So this mixture is what you take it for amplification. So this contains both human genetic material as well as the genetic material of the virus. So this in most of the cases, this human genetic material acts as the internal control. So if you get an internal control, when you're running the amplification, that is the next procedure. That is the actual PCR procedure. So when you're doing the amplification, if the PCR, if the human genetic material is also amplified, and you are able to read that when you are reading the text, reading the test results, it is most likely that it shows that it acts as an internal control. It shows that your procedure for extraction was correct. In case your sample collection was not proper, you have not really taken the sample properly, when the sample was not actually collected, or it was not inserted properly, you have not collected enough of the material, then you will not get the internal control, or the human genetic material will not be there. So what happens? You will not be able, you will get an invalid result. So ideally, you will have to you have to ask for a repeat sampling, because there would not have been adequate amount of RNA to be detected there. The gold standard for diagnosis for the time being, it is real-time reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. Real-time means once you have extracted the RNA, you are going to put it into the thermocycler, where the RNA is subjected to all these things. Everybody knows you are subjecting it to various temperatures, and there is amplification of the RNA. So at the same time, there will be a screen which shows how the progress, what are the cycles that is going on, how which cycle is going on, and what time. That is all seen in real time. That is why it gives the name real-time reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. It's the current gold standard for diagnosing suspected cases of COVID-19. So gene target, it depends, it varies on the kits that we are using. Initially, we had to first do the for the presumptive diagnosis. You have to find out whether the patient was positive for EG, whether the sample was positive for EG. If it was negative, then you had to remove all those, take it as all negative, and then process. If at all you got a presumptive positive, you had to do a confirmatory. But now you get combined kits where you can detect E gene, RDRP, and gene together. There are kits that gives you E gene and ORF. There are kits that have 3 genes that can be detected in one go. There are kits that will detect 2 genes in one go. So at least 2 or more than 2 genes are to be detected for confirmation of the presence of COVID-19. So it's a sensitive and reliable test. It takes longer time for results because it needs to be transmitted from the collection area to a specifically equipped lab. And from there, the extraction procedure, as I said, it takes time. 3 to 4 hours of extraction procedure is there. Then when you put for thermocycling, when you put for amplification, extraction of pure RNA, and extraction of pure RNA means it does not only contain RNA, it contains human genetic material as well. So there will be kit of enzymes that is provided with the PCR kit, master mix. You have primer and probe and enzyme, everything will be there. So these enzymes, primer and probe, will help you to copy the RNA and convert it into DNA. This is amplified to allow the viral detection. Millions of copies are formed. So just, these are all basic things, everybody knows it. I'm just showing you just in case anybody needs it. So polymerase chain reaction, you know what is polymerase chain reaction. The RNA, it is denatured. That is there are 3 steps which will require 3 different temperatures, 94 degrees Celsius, then to 40, then 54, then again 72. So first denaturing occurs, then annealing occurs, and then extension occurs. So in first one cycle, you will get, during the second cycle, there will be 4 sets. In the third cycle, there will be 16. The fourth cycle, there will be 32. So as it goes on, when it ends about, usually the RT-PCR cycles that go on is 35 to 40. So once it reaches a 30 or 35 or 40 cycles, you will have millions of copies, millions or billions of copies. So these RNA, there will be fluorescent markers. Yeah, you can shift to the next slide. There will be fluorescent markers which will be bound to the amplified DNA here. So this light produced, or the fluorescence that is produced, it is read by the machine, and it is the fluorescence that is detected by the machine, and the result is generated. So the intensity of fluorescence. So it depends upon the, again, that's what I'm coming to now, viral load. Depends upon the viral load of the patient, or viral load that you have given, or you have collected. When you collected properly, you would have got a nice viral load. So if the intensity of fluorescence reaches a particular level or a threshold, that is when the machine will detect that the fluorescence is there and gives you the curves. There are curves that will start spiking. So that is fluorescence will be detected. So that is called the cycle threshold. The number of cycles required for the fluorescence signal to cross the threshold. There is a threshold. So there is a point where your fluorescent signal will be identified. So below that, nothing will happen. Above that, if the fluorescence, when the DNA, which is fluorescent markers, are bound to the amplified DNA, when it is amplified, it spikes up, and it is at that point when you did that, you can call the cycle threshold or the CT value. So CT value is inversely proportional to the amount of target nuclei or the viral load. So it is inversely proportional. So lower the CT value, higher will be the viral load. But that is not clear cut. You can't rely that if the sample collection was proper, yes, it is clear cut. There is no doubt that the viral load is very high and the patient is infected. But in case the sample collection was not proper, there was some problem in the transport, something has happened in between which there was a break in the maintaining the quality of the sample, then even if you don't get a viral load, even if you get a lower viral load, doesn't mean that the patient is not infected. Yes, so these are the other targets that you can, that will be used for identifying. That is ORF, that is open reading frame 1A and B, the nucleic acid genes, then 2 targets there of RDRP, then 2 targets of N gene. There are various, these are the various kits that have been available in these institutes. So these can all be identified by various steps. So you have probes and primes and probes set, and you have enzyme. That is how the master mix are prepared. So this was what the one of the nucleic acid amplification based RT-PCR test, or the real-time RT-PCR, which is the gold standard. So it has 2 minimum regions, targets 2 minimum regions to be chosen. So it's a similar procedure where you can do it in a smaller number of time and in a smaller number of samples with a shorter duration of time. This is the cartridge-based nucleic acid amplification, and TrueNAT, which is a microchip-based RT-PCR assay. This is also RT-PCR assay. So the first picture shows the TrueNAT. That is, it has got 2 extraction machines, and then the one on the right side, it shows the amplification machine or the PCR machine. So extraction is done here by 20 to 30 minutes. And then once the extraction is done, you load it into the PCR amplification, and by 40 minutes you get the result. So within 1 to 2 hours, you get the result for in TrueNAT. But there is a limit that you can do only 1 or 2 extraction, 1 extraction at a time in each one machine, and 4 amplification at one time. But PCR, the other PCR machine, the thermocycler, bigger thermocycler like the bioradinol, there is a slot for you can do larger number, 96 can be done. So 2-step, that is screening for, I said previously also, there is first it was 2 steps screening, E gene, and first E gene was done, then you go for RDRP or ORF. But now you get duplex genes, duplex chips for TrueNAT, which can be detected in one go. If it is present, both the genes will be showing the CT value, everything, and that is well. So these are the sequence where you can see the RDRP, E gene, and N genes. Now we come to the RT-LAMP. RT-LAMP is one of the recent developments where you don't require sophisticated machines. You can read the result by just viewing. So it is a reverse transcriptase loop mediated isothermal amplification. Loop mediated isothermal amplification. That is, sampling is similar to how you do for RT-PCR or rapid antigen. Nasopharyngeal swabs or salivary sample are collected and placed in a VTM containing any inactivation factor. Then what you need to do, you don't need to extract. The extraction procedure, which I said will take 3 to 4 hours for about 90 samples, 100 samples. So you don't need to extract. The (65°C) and thermal block or thermocycler can be used. So results, it is achieved by the, sorry, once more, just move to the previous slide. Yeah, results are achieved by the naked eye detection based on colorimetric outputs using different strategies. So it can change that whenever you are using what is the indicator that you use. So change in pH using phenol red, the medium acidifies after our DNA amplification. So it will act as an indirect sensor. So medium will remain pink when it is negative, yellow when it becomes positive. Other indicators are hydroxynaphthol blue, which will change to because of the presence of reduced magnesium ions. And amplified DNA will change its color from dark blue to light blue. a violet to light blue. Then cyber green can also be used. So there will also be change in fluorescence. So that is, as I said, it's a newer technique similar to RT-PCR, but you don't need to do the extraction. It's a rapid colorimetric detection. Simple, rapid and sensitive, constant temperature. You don't need any varying temperature. Amplified DNA much higher than RT-PCR. Pure amplification, DNA amplification is much higher than that of RT-PCR. And user friendly. Result can be read visually and you don't need a special machine to read it. So again, showing the what are the things that you have to do for testing, used for testing antigen, antibody, and post responses. So serological testing. So it's much debated topic that regarding the current value, the diagnosis and monitoring, how it is useful in diagnosis and monitoring. So there's a general concern that use in acute phase infection is too late because antibody develops only later on, maybe 1 week to 2 week between only at that time. So you don't have the its importance in the current or the infection and the current infection. This infection cannot be identified using the serological testings. So we may cross-react with serological responses of other seasonal coronavirus, but it can be made use to improve serological testing in future for public and occupational health monitoring and assessment post-COVID and also post-vaccination. So it's an antibody testing known as serological testing, blood test that is done to find out. Blood is what the specimen that we use is blood. It has a complementary role to RT-PCR, maybe you could say. And then immune-based assays is what we use for antibody testing. Lateral flow assays are there. Then ELISA is there. So you can detect IgA, IgM, IgG, and also viral antigens. They will detect immune response rather than the virus itself. So lateral flow assays, they can you can when you're looking for antibodies, you can look for the binding antibodies or neutralizing antibodies. They detect binding antibody will detect whether you have developed any antibodies in response to your COVID infection, but they do not indicate how extensive or effective your immune response is. It will just tell you whether you have enough antibodies to, or what was the response, what has happened when you after you have had a COVID infection, whether you have your body has produced antibodies. Neutralizing antibodies are the ones which are the newer ones and newer identification or newer method to identify. It is more sensitive and develops, it detects a subgroup of antibodies which may inactivate the virus. So you are looking for protective antibody or neutralizing antibodies. If it is present, you are likely to fight against. So you may not get infected, or you may tide over the infection without much complications. So step towards finding out how effective our eyes are in blocking the virus to help protect you from the COVID-19 infection. So whether it is important is that why you have to look for neutralizing antibodies is that how effective these antibodies will help you fight against another COVID-19 infection. So just showing how the lateral flow assay, so all the card tests that you all know. And then coming to another immunosorbent or immunoassay, that is enzyme linked immunoassay. This again, you can look for neutralizing the immune response for the patient, immunochromatography, chemiluminescence, but they do not have a clear-cut role in diagnosing current infection. Maybe prognostically or later on, how you have developed a post-vaccination, how you have developed a number of antibodies can be made use of. So yeah, this is just showing how nucleic acid amplification and antigen detection, how you are using the NAT or RT-PCR, NAT test, we would say, nucleic acid amplification test, current infection with SARS coronavirus 2 can be identified. It will inform the individual of the infection status, inform patient management and action needs to be taken to prevent them, and also inform actions needed for prevent transmission. Patient management as well as prevent transmission. Beneficiary is the individual, healthcare and long-term care facility and public health. Antibody detection, it is past exposure or post exposure to SARS coronavirus 2. So it will detect susceptible individuals, antibodies will be negative, susceptible individuals and those previously infected. Identify the individuals with neutralizing antibodies and also facilitate contact tracing, and also it can be used for surveillance. Then identify those potentially immune to SARS-CoV-2 if the test can detect protective immunity. Then healthcare facilities as well as public health is involved or the beneficiaries. So this is the critical role, how SARS coronavirus has emerged as a pandemic. The infection, there is a word disease. It's self-limiting sometimes. Most of the time it is self-limiting. The patient recovers. Death also is a complication, which is which is in case of other patients with other comorbidities. So the importance of lab comes here where the diagnosis of whether you identify that the patient is actually having coronavirus or COVID-19 or SARS coronavirus, infected with SARS coronavirus 2 disease, then that is in clinical side, you have to do the staging, prognostication and therapeutic monitoring. After recovery, you have to look for the epidemiological surveillance, like for antibodies. So there's a critical role for laboratory medicine at the time being for the diagnostic. We stand at the interface. So other parameters that clinicians they do that we will look for when you are suspecting this lymphopenia, increased C-reactive protein, lactate dehydrogenase, increased erythrocyte sedimentation rate, D dimer, then reduced albumin and hemoglobin. Other predictors are neutrophil count will be raised, lactate dehydrogenase, aminotransferases, D dimer, procalcitonin. These are all major predictors about the severity of COVID-19. So now I said I will be dealing with some of the some of the pre-analytical and analytical areas where you have a problem. I think during the class itself, during the topic itself, I would have mentioned few. So general, it is identification or misidentification of the samples, then inadequate procedure for specimen, that is collection, the proper collection, proper transport or proper handling is required to get the quality samples to the lab. Then comes to the storage, that is a collection of inappropriate or inadequate material for quality or volume. As I said during the class, along with that, collection and sorry, just the previous slide. Collection has to be appropriate, presence of interfering substances. There may be some interfering substances that has to be ruled out from the lab side. Then manual errors, that is pipetting errors should not be there. It should be person who are working in the lab should have work with high precision, very careful. Because you are dealing with very tiny volumes of liquid. So if you pipette and if you're pipetting error, if the correction is not proper, if the volume is not proper, if you think that you have collected, then there is nothing. Your complete procedure will be a waste. Then specific things that can happen is sample contamination, leakage of samples. Then in case of patient who are receiving antiretroviral therapy, all those things need to be labeled and sent to the lab when you are sending. So testing is carried out outside. Testing is carried out outside of the diagnostic window. So what is this is the potential pre-analytical and analytical vulnerabilities. That was what I said I will be discussing towards the end. So there will be active viral recombination. So when you're using non-adequately validated assays, there's always a problem which will be created whether you give it, whether you get a positive, whether there will be the result is synchronous or whether there is concordance. Then there will be sometimes the kit, there may be lack of harmonization of primers and probes. Then there will be misinterpretation of expression of profiles. Non-specific PCR annealing can occur. These are all that occurs in the lab, within the lab. And then insufficient or inadequate material that comes from the sample during the sample collection. Then sometimes instrument malfunction. All these things are the things that can happen within as well as outside within the laboratories when you're doing polymerase chain reaction or nucleic acid amplification test. So why might COVID-19 tests fail? So these are a few things that we have come to. They may be in the early stage of the disease. So you are suspecting a patient who has from some infection. You are sending the patient to the for RT-PCR test, but you get a negative result. They may be, that is, the patient may be in the early stage of disease with a viral load that is too low to be detected. Okay, as I said, there is a therapeutic, there is a diagnostic window. We said in the previous slide, there is a diagnostic window where you get the viral load when it peaks at a point of time and it falls. So if the viral load is too low to be detected, then the patient may show a negative test. They may have no major respiratory symptoms. So there will be very little virus that be present in the nose or throat. Concentration of viruses in the nose and throat may be very less. There may have been a problem with the sample collection. Like we said before, sample collection, meaning there may be a very little sample in the tests collected. So you may not have collected properly. Then there may have been technical issues inherent in the test, that is mutation, virus mutation, that you are, whatever you're targeting, what are the kit that you're using, whatever you have targeted, may not be compatible with what the virus you are having. The virus may have mutated. You may not be able to. That is, variants may be there which cannot be detected with the particular genes or the targets that you are doing in the usual procedure. There may have been poor handling and shipping of samples in the test material. So we say no, viral samples has to be transported quickly. That is why it is given in a special medium. If it is not properly transmitted, if the temperature or the cold chain is not properly maintained, it gets disintegrated. So the virus, when you're trying to amplify, when you're trying to extract, they may not produce enough material because they would have got, their RNA would have got disintegrated. So we are coming to the end. So how to prevent COVID-19? So you wash your hands well and often to avoid contamination. Cover your mouth and nose, and like how we do when you're coughing and sneezing. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Clean, disinfect. Stop shaking hands for hugging. Maintain social distancing 2 meters apart. So symptoms, you should be cautious when you have a fever, high temperature, cough, shortness of breath, breathing difficulties. Stop not, just you have to be aware, you have to get tested. So labs, we have to improvise ourselves and become super labs. That is what current time that we are asking for. That's all. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? There are some questions in the chat box.
I'll just read that. Yes, BSL lab is needed for testing COVID-19 specimen. Yes, we do need BSL lab for testing COVID-19 specimens. Because when you are opening the swab, you are collecting it in the VTM, but when it is opening everything, they can result in aerosol formation. So better to you should have a BSL 2 level 2 for testing. Then what is the next one? Second, I will connect with my phone. Laptop charge is going up. Yes.
There is another question from Dr. Sharon. What tests are available at present for detection of specific variants, and where is it available in our state? Ma'am, shall I repeat it? What tests are available at present for detection of specific variants, and where is it available in our state?
What are the other questions? I can't see it.
Ma'am, what tests are available at present
Can you please
for
read out?
detection of? Ma'am, I'm reading it out, ma'am.
My laptop got shut down. Is there any antibody test to differentiate natural infection and vaccination? No, that has not. Maybe it is under trial, but we have to continue doing it, or we have to do studies or something like that. You have to look for the infection, how the antibody levels, what is the antibody levels in the natural infection, how it has occurred, and after vaccination, how it has occurred. There is no clear cut to say that antibody test to say that you can differentiate between natural infection and vaccination. What tests are available at present for detection of specific variants? Where is it available in our state? Specific variants, samples are being sent for sequencing. Whichever you get positive, we always send for sequencing, and those samples sequencing, it is being sent to Trivandrum and also to Pune. So there you have to, once they detect if there is any variants, they give us the list. Will IgG antibody titer after 6 months second dose correctly predict the need of booster dose? The need of booster dose is still, we are just thinking about it. We are not sure whether it is required. That study has to go on. Extensive study needs to be done to identify whether you need a booster dose. Can a patient in recovery phase have a low CT lower value than what is at the time of active disease? Yes, definitely. Patient in recovery state can have a lower CT value, because as the disease progresses, we saw that, no, the diagnostic window, the patient, the viral load it is peaking. It starts from when the symptoms arises, or you do have patients, no, when they do not even have symptoms, they are asymptomatic, they would have tested simply for travel or something else. So you get to see very high viral load. So that is obvious when you have a infection, when it was during the active stage, when the viral load was high towards the end. So you remember, no, previously when we used to test every alternate day, we used to do RT-PCR. So every alternate day, we used to get positive, and the patient, there has been cases where the patients who were there in admission for about 100 or 90 to 100 days. That is not required now. So as the viral load reduces, there will be chances of the infection will be lesser. So that is it. Optimum cutoff level for antibody. That also we'll have to see how it goes on. That I'll find out and I'll let you know. Cutoff for antibody. With the development of self-testing at home, what all errors can occur? Self-testing at home, it is antigen, no? Antigen testing is what we do as the self-testing means. So antigen, it is, see, it has got, it can detect positive. You get a positive test, yes, sure, it is positive. But if it is negative, it doesn't mean you are not infected. It doesn't mean it. You can always get a false negative, false positive or false negative result. No, you have to always do it. Do the confirm it by an RT-PCR. Then when you're doing sample collection at self-test, that will also vary. No? That is what. Then how good is other body fluids in identifying infection? Yeah, there are body fluids that can be used. That is what I said. There is urine pieces, other body fluids. Just yet to know how much studies are going on, how much are that we have to know. My better concentration has been found, or some 70 to 80% has been found in bronchoalveolar lavage. Then even if it is lesser, there is lesser than that in nasopharyngeal, but nasopharyngeal swabs are better compared to the throat swabs. It yielded better amount, better volume, or sorry, better viral load when you detected, when you used it for testing with RT-PCR. Yes, is it okay now? Anything more?
Does anyone have any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, since the questions are over, we are ending the discussion session here. Thank you, ma'am, for being our first guest in this webinar series. I'm sure that the session was informative and interactive. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. The next session on reliability versus validity by Dr. Deviraj Sir, Assistant Professor in the Department of Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Thiruvananthapuram, on 12th November at 2 p.m. Reliability means consistency. Validity means accuracy. The tests that we have seen today, do they give an accurate and consistent results? Does consistency and accuracy both needed to test to identify diseases? We will discuss this in this next session, which will be for 2 hours. See you all in next week. Your feedback forms are valuable, so kindly fill in the feedback form, send in the comment box. We wish you all an enjoyable weekend. Thank you.
Okay.